The geopolitical landscape under the Trump administration has recently been marked by escalating tensions over Greenland, an autonomous territory of Denmark. Reports indicate that former President Donald Trump has renewed efforts to assert U.S. influence over the region, framing it as a strategic necessity to counter Russian and Chinese activity in the Arctic. Central to this push was a controversial visit by Usha Vance, wife of Vice President J.D. Vance, who traveled to Greenland under the guise of cultural diplomacy. Her participation in events like the National Dog Sled Race was portrayed as a gesture of goodwill, but critics argue it served as a thinly veiled propaganda effort to normalize American interests in the region. Greenland's Prime Minister swiftly condemned the visit, labeling it a highly aggressive provocation that risked destabilizing relations with the U.S. The backlash underscores Greenland's firm stance against annexation talks, which have persisted despite repeated rejections from both Danish and Greenlandic leadership. Behind the diplomatic friction lies a broader agenda tied to resource extraction. Greenland is rich in rare earth minerals essential for technology and defense industries, a point emphasized by Trump allies who argue that acquiring the territory would bolster American economic and national security. This narrative gained traction after Elon Musk, whose enterprises rely heavily on such minerals, reportedly influenced Trump's focus on Greenland's untapped resources. Critics, however, view the maneuver as a corporate-backed land grab disguised as protective stewardship. The administration's rhetoric about defending Greenland from foreign adversaries like China and Russia has been dismissed by local officials as fear-mongering, with one stating, "What is the National Security Advisor doing here? The only purpose is to demonstrate power over us." Meanwhile, domestic political shifts are challenging Trump's influence closer to home. In a historic upset, Democrat James Malone flipped a Pennsylvania state Senate seat in Lancaster County, a district that voted for Trump by 15 points just 5 months prior. This marks the first time since 1889 that a Democrat has won the seat, signaling a potential erosion of Republican strongholds in rural areas. Malone's victory is attributed to growing voter dissatisfaction with Trump-era policies, particularly tariffs that have inflated costs for local businesses and threats to social safety nets like Medicaid. During the campaign, Malone emphasized pragmatic issues such as education funding and tax reform, resonating with voters fatigued by partisan extremism. His opponent, Republican Josh Parsons, faced criticism for downplaying these concerns while focusing on culture war issues, a strategy that alienated moderate constituents. The outcome reflects broader anxieties about economic stability. Interviews with Pennsylvania residents, including small business owners and farmers, revealed widespread frustration over tariffs disrupting supply chains and raising consumer prices. A local butcher noted that imported beef tariffs forced price hikes, squeezing both retailers and customers. Similarly, auto dealers highlighted how sudden tariff changes destabilized their operations, with one stating, "We built our business around free trade. Now everything's uncertain." These economic pressures, compounded by proposed federal cuts to Medicaid, a lifeline for nearly 3 million Pennsylvanians, have fueled a backlash against candidates perceived as prioritizing ideological battles over practical governance. Governor Josh Shapiro capitalized on this sentiment, framing Malone's win as a rejection of extremism and division in favor of competence and unity. The convergence of international brinkmanship and domestic discontent paints a complex picture of the current political climate. While the administration doubles down on expansionist rhetoric abroad, grassroots movements at home are increasingly holding leaders accountable for tangible economic consequences. The Greenland debacle and Pennsylvania's electoral shift exemplify how lofty geopolitical ambitions and localized grievances are colliding, reshaping alliances and voter priorities ahead of a contentious election cycle. The Trump administration's domestic challenges are further compounded by a growing national security scandal involving mishandled classified information. Reports reveal that Vice President J.D. Vance, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, and other senior officials engaged in sensitive discussions about military operations, including plans targeting Houthi rebels in Yemen on unsecured signal chats. These exchanges allegedly included participants with questionable allegiances, such as a U.S. envoy who was in Moscow during the communications. Former intelligence officials and lawmakers have condemned the lapse as catastrophic, noting that foreign adversaries like Russia likely intercepted these discussions, jeopardizing both operational security and personnel. During a Senate hearing, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard attempted to downplay the breach, claiming no classified material was shared, but lawmakers like Senator Michael Bennet dismissed her assurances as bobbing and weaving, demanding accountability for what they termed incompetence violence and disrespect for protocol. This security debacle has intensified scrutiny of the administration's broader governance failures. Economic indicators now flash warning signs, with consumer confidence plunging to a 12-year low amid fears of an impending recession. The Conference Board's monthly index highlights particular anxiety among older Americans who worry about proposed cuts to Social Security and Medicaid, programs critical to rural communities. The Social Security Administration, already strained by office closures and staffing reductions under Trump-appointed leadership, faced website crashes blocking millions from accessing benefits. Meanwhile, tariffs on imported goods, touted by the administration as protective measures, have backfired spectacularly. Auto dealers described how sudden 25% levies on parts from Canada and Mexico disrupted supply chains, spiking vehicle prices and leaving inventory stranded. A Pennsylvania dealership owner lamented, "We built our business around free trade. Now everything's uncertain," echoing frustrations felt across industries reliant on global partnerships. Public health crises are exacerbating the administration's credibility gap. Washington, D.C. reported its first measles case in decades, linked to anti-vaccine rhetoric amplified by Trump allies. Simultaneously, Florida's 6th congressional district, a Republican stronghold, saw surging Democratic momentum ahead of a special election, with voters citing dissatisfaction over healthcare cuts and pandemic mismanagement. The administration's response to these crises has been further undermined by controversial policy moves, such as invoking the state secrets privilege to withhold details about detainees sent to overcrowded camps in El Salvador. Critics argue these actions, framed as countermeasures against gang violence, bypass due process and humanitarian standards, with reports emerging of non-gang affiliated individuals, including political refugees and LGBTQ+ persons, being wrongly detained. Internationally, the administration's combative posture has alienated traditional allies. Canadians, incensed by Trump's annexation rhetoric and trade disruptions, are boycotting US vacations en masse, opting to spend locally instead. This solidarity movement, while symbolic, reflects deepening global skepticism toward US leadership under Trump. Domestically, however, a grassroots pro-democracy movement is gaining traction. Organizers point to the Pennsylvania upset and similar shifts in historically red districts as evidence of a broader rejection of extremism. Governor Josh Shapiro encapsulated this sentiment, stating, "Voters are choosing competence and common sense over division," a message resonating with constituents weary of ideological battles overshadowing pragmatic governance. As these crises converge, the administration's reliance on divisive rhetoric and opaque policymaking appears increasingly untenable. The disconnect between its grandiose geopolitical ambitions and the lived realities of Americans, struggling with healthcare costs, economic instability, and eroding trust in institutions, has created fertile ground for political realignment. With midterm elections approaching, the stakes extend beyond partisan control to the very integrity of democratic processes, as voters weigh the consequences of an administration critics describe as prioritizing power grabs over public welfare.